Coming up on Chasing the Natty, we're going to shake things up a little bit this week. We're still going to have our recap for week 8. We'll still bring you a set of waiver wire pickups for this week. We're just going to only have a little bit of a dynasty twist to some of the players we'll be discussing today. Nate and I will also be covering a few things that halfway through the season we realized we were totally wrong about during the preseason. All this and more coming right after this.
Zappy looking to Jared Stearns, who makes the catch and scores.
What a burst! Trayvon Henderson, as advertised, touchdown Buckeyes!
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast.
All right, welcome in, everybody. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. Hope you guys are having a wonderful ride to your work on this Monday morning. We are here. Week 8 of college football is in the books. My Georgia Bulldogs were on their bye this week, so it honestly, again, this is going to sound weird, but like the week that Georgia's off is honestly one of my favorite weekends in the entire season of college football because I enjoy watching my Bulldogs, but there is something really nice about just going into a slate of games knowing that you don't have your team and how they perform in the back of your mind, and you can just sit back and enjoy watching football. And I'm sure my co-host, Mr. Nate Marquise, can definitely speak to that as well, as his Oklahoma Sooners were off this week as well. But even more so, Nate, how are you doing today, sir?
Man, I am good. Yeah, Sooners were off this weekend. I had the pleasure of actually having to attend a 3-year-old's birthday party. So, yeah, I guess it was good timing since you did have the bye week. But, 3-year-old birthday parties in the fall, not as bad as fall weddings, but still not ideal either for watching sports. But my brother-in-law's setup's actually pretty good. He had a big screen going in his basement with the Big 12 games. He's a big Kansas fan, so okay. We still were able to tune in a little bit. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, but you still have 10 3-year-olds running around screaming and stuff. It's hard to pay attention too much, but it was a good time.
Yeah, no doubt about that whatsoever. And like you said, not ideal for watching sports, but at the same time, fall weddings you can control the date of. Well, when your kid is born, that's not really something you can truly control.
Yeah,
so I don't blame you too much on that one. Or it's not your kid, but like still.
I was thinking about that like before I went over there. I was like, there's nothing really you can do about it. But it's not, fall weddings, the deal is that it's really hard sometimes to get to a TV. You know what I mean? There's a ceremony, there's a reception sometimes doesn't have TV access, so birthdays are a little bit more conducive to watching the games, but still it was a little not my normal Saturday routine, let's say.
No, not at all. And again, I imagine you had fun. I imagine your daughter had fun and everything like that.
Oh yeah.
But even still, sounds like we got a couple games to catch you up on here and everything like that. And you said you were able to kind of catch a few games here and there. So let's talk about some of these games from this past weekend. Again, we had 5 ranked v ranked matchups. I don't think we really need to talk about Mississippi State, Alabama. That game went exactly how I thought it would. Alabama got right. They absolutely steamrolled Mississippi State. All my Will Rogers under bets hit perfectly this weekend, so I knew that game literally went exactly how I thought it would. But let's talk about... Actually, I'll let you pick the first game, Nate. Which game do you want to go to first?
Let's talk about what went down in Stillwater between Texas and Oklahoma State. That game was pretty wild. It looked like, Texas kind of jumped out early and kind of got all over them and looked like it was going to be, blowout, easy victory for Texas. And they really struggled towards the end. It kind of reminded me of how Oklahoma State and TCU went last week when Oklahoma State kind of got out on them early and then just fell apart in the second half. Their offense didn't look the same. That's kind of how Texas looked this week. Quinn Ewers was really on the struggle bus this weekend.
See, here's we'll definitely talk about Quinn Ewers in a second. I disagree that it was a lot like Oklahoma State last week, because like Oklahoma State, there was like a conscious effort to slow the game down once they got to a lead. They tried to run out the clock in the first half. In the second half, they were trying to just run out the clock, keep their lead, and everything like that. Texas, it really was that just something was off with the offense pretty much starting in the second half. Quinn Ewers, I wish I could have a half breakdown, but like I think they said at one point he had completed 7 of the last 19 passes that he had thrown. He was off all day long. He was overthrowing Xavier Worthy consistently, and he finished the day with a completion percentage of, just doing quick math here.
Yeah, wasn't he like 19 of 49 or something like that?
19 of 49. So he had a completion percentage of 38.8%. That is
Yeesh.
Abhorrent. And again, most of this came in the second half. Something happened in that second half.
It looked to me like it was outside of Alabama, obviously. It looked to me like the first time where he was feeling pressure consistently, and I think he started to feel some of that pressure with the pass rush early in the third quarter, and then it almost just kind of messed with him a little bit, and you could tell there were a couple times he was throwing the ball, overthrowing, throwing it out of bounds, and he didn't even have pressure on him. It was almost like he was just expecting that his line was going to have somebody break through, allow somebody to break through, and he was kind of in panic mode. And I think that's kind of what we saw happen there. Some things that you expect from a first-year starter, really. I mean, he's 2 years out, but a first-year starter, and 5-star or not, he still hasn't seen a whole bunch of snaps and experience to be able to handle pressure consistently like that. So and on the flip side, props to Oklahoma State. Spencer Sanders continues to fight through a rash of injuries, it sounds like, between his ankle and his shoulder, and dude is still putting up some pretty impressive numbers. He's got to be a top 5 or 6 QB so far this year, fantasy points, I would guess.
I got you. He is QB 5 on the year right now in terms of total fantasy points.
That's amazing. Like I sent out a tweet about this at the beginning of the year. There's literally never been a more consistent average quarterback than what we saw Spencer Sanders his first 3 or 4 years in college. Like if you look at his stat line, those first 3 years that he was starter or whatever, I mean, they are almost identical. Every game's a roller coaster, but at the end of the season, he puts up the exact same numbers. And then all of a sudden this year was the Spencer Sanders that we had, or myself and Bainbridge and a whole bunch of other people had been like assuming we were going to get 3 years ago. It just came way later than expected.
Well, I would say it came the moment that everybody got off of him, because he was not a top quarterback in terms of drafts this year. He's somebody that you consistently could get after the 10th round for the most part. So, of course, it's what happened. It's like Quentin Johnson. The day that people started dropping him from their rosters, that's when he decided to go full Quentin Johnson, did what we knew he could do. Other things I could note in this game, shout out to Dominic Richardson for an abhorrent efficiency in terms of 13 carries for 24 yards. But dadgummit, did he get 3 touchdowns and basically saved my fantasy day in at least 2 leagues.
Did he get hurt, or did they just say we've had enough?
He did get hurt. Okay. He did go to the locker room in the second half. Trust me, again, I was in a really close fantasy game, and I kept looking for Richardson. I'm like, where is he? At one point, I just looked it up, and there was a tweet that said he had gone to the locker room.
Okay. So, I thought maybe Gundy was pulling the cord after a while. We're just like, man, anybody could do this. Like anybody could get 20 yards off of 13 carries. Why don't we let one of the young bucks have a chance here? But okay, he got hurt, so that makes sense.
Well, speaking of the young bucks, and I think this is one last thing we could touch on in this game and everything. I mean, obviously Bijan's probably gone after this year. Dominic Richardson, I believe he is in. How many years does Dominic Richardson have?
He's eligible. This is his 3rd year, I believe, out of school. Because I believe he's in the same. I think he was in the same class as Kendre Miller and Zach Evans, and that was kind of the whole deal. He was committed to TCU or something like that, and then they ended up getting Kendre Miller. I can't remember how it all played out, but anyways, this is his 3rd year, so he could technically go. I don't know where he would go. I don't think the NFL is going to be too interested in a running back averaging 2.5 yards a carry, but
I mean, but even still,
I do think that what you talked about with Bijan moving on, there's a really serious debate that could be had about what Texas backfield is going to look like next year. Because
my money's on Roschon. If he comes back for another year, that staff loves him. That staff has shown that he is the clear number 2 behind Robinson. When Bijan isn't that dude, Roschon stepped up and has had some pretty good games, even though Bijan has, again, clearly Bijan is that dude. But my money's on Roschon next year.
Yeah, it's and I don't know, and I'm curious to see what Roschon does. Like, does he stay or does he decide to? I mean, he's been around for 4 years, and he supposedly is like the biggest leader in that locker room. When he got hurt in the spring game, or I think one of the scrimmages leading up to the season that caused him to miss like the first game of the year, like there was a lot of talk that like he is the heart and soul of the team. But yeah, I mean, if let's assume he comes back, with guys that we run with Campus to Canton, they have no interest in Roschon because he doesn't have that big NFL upside. Everybody wants to see, Jaden Blue or what's the other, not Rob Brooks. Everybody really likes Jonathan Brooks as well. My money would be on Brooks if Roschon were to leave. I'm kind of with you that if Roschon does come back, I think he is going to at least get first dibs at RB1, and because the staff loves him, team loves him, and if you're getting first crack at it, and they've got a really solid. Everybody's coming back on their offensive line next year. You got all those pieces. I mean, he could put up some pretty big numbers next year.
Yeah, and he's got the receiving ability that has also helped make Bijan such a big deal. So,
yeah.
Moving on to another game here, let's go to the high-scoring CFF game that we all really wanted to see this weekend, and that was number 9 UCLA at number 10 Oregon. Oregon comes out on top, 45-30. Oregon played a darn near perfect game in this game. Bo Nix was absolutely on fire, 22 for 28, 5 touchdowns, 283 yards. That was one of the easiest props of the weekend, of Bo Nix going over 2.5 touchdowns. So he had another incredible day. Man, what a turnaround for him as well. Again, he's QB3 on the year right now, and I don't think he has, outside of the Georgia game, he has not finished outside the top 12 weekly.
That's crazy.
This is Bo Nix we're talking about. Maybe it was a change of scenery. That's all I needed.
We'll dive more into Bo Nix on another segment we've got coming up here in a minute.
But I want to throw out there Bucky Irving. He's starting to separate himself in this backfield a little bit. 19 carries, 107 yards. Didn't get a touchdown. That honor belonged to Jordan James. But even still, we're finally kind of getting what we wanted out of that backfield, is somebody separating.
Yeah, I was looking at that. They Bucky Irving and who was the other guy? No, Whittington was the other one that he'd been splitting with, and I'm just like, man, I want to invest in one of these running backs, because if one of them is able to seize the majority of the share, then I think he's a very valuable piece to have moving forward to the playoffs.
Yep.
But it'd been essentially a 50-50 split up till this time. But yeah, this was the first game I really was able to get a good look at Oregon, because I was excited to see what this matchup looked like. And yeah, you're right, man. They were clicking on, they were firing on all cylinders. That offense looks really good, and it does not look like there's anybody in the Pac-12 that's going to be able to really slow them down. And it is a travesty that we do not get to watch USC and Oregon play in the regular season this year, because the amount of points that you talk about lighting up a scoreboard. They would have to set that line at like the total like 74 or something. It would be insane.
Oh yeah, and they probably would still beat it.
So yeah, as far as the UCLA side, man, that offense is really good. But man, DTR can be just make you want to pull your hair out sometimes watching him. Some of the plays that he does, he can make a very easy play look so challenging sometimes. And sometimes he'll have, like, there was one play where he had Charbonnet on just kind of like an open, he just kind of flared out towards the sideline out of the backfield, wide open. If he could have dumped it off to him, he'd have ran for at least 20, 30 yards, if not had a walk-in touchdown. And he decides to try to thread the needle 25 yards downfield in between two defenders to try to get a touchdown. I'm like, bro, what are you doing? Just sometimes you can just make things so difficult. And I think it's kind of been the story of his career.
Well, I mean, again, I think a lot of these quarterbacks sometimes forget, like, in the moment. And again, obviously, I can't armchair quarterback too much over here. I've never played a down of football in my life. But at the same time, like, football is a game played in intervals of 10 yards, not 25, 30 yards down the field. Sometimes all you need to do is just make sure that you can get that new set of downs, and that's all you got to do. Again, enough of us have played Madden before in our lives to where it's like sometimes when you're playing a game, all that matters is that you just stay on the field. And if you keep taking shots that you aren't sure that you can complete, you're going to put your team in trouble, and that's what DTR kind of did here in this game. So
yeah.
Zach Charbonnet was a beast as always.
Yeah, I was going to say similar to the Texas running back situation. I'm really curious to see what that quarterback room looks like for UCLA next year, because, you know, Chip Kelly has kind of gone with the veteran backups whenever DTR has been out this year. Meanwhile, he's got the freshman, Martin, that's there, that is by far the most highly recruited guy in that room. But it also feels like a transfer's coming, you know what I mean? Because they got Gabriel last year with DTR still on the roster. So if you're going that hard after Gabriel while DTR is there, I mean, you would think that they're going to go after another transfer QB, don't you think?
Yeah, again, I don't think that's outside the question whatsoever. I'm a believer in Garbers. Again, we're going to definitely talk about more about the impact of the transfer portal and how to read these situations moving forward. But again, to me, it's kind of like the same deal as, like, until something happens, you go with the guy who is at least like, or you go with the guy, like, before the preseason start, a lot of the guys that I targeted were not guys that I thought could take over rooms by the end of the year. I just went ahead and got the guy who's going to get the first start. Guys like Tyler Shuck, guys like Jairo Brock and everything like that, where a lot of people were telling me, like, oh, they're gonna lose out in the job sometime during the year. I'm like, yeah, that's possible, but at the same time, I'd rather have the guy who is starting. That way, I don't have, or because they have the inside track pretty much the rest of the season. I feel like it's a similar thing here of the veteran, a guy like Garbers, is until a transfer comes in, it's worth investing in them until that happens.
Normally, I would totally agree with you, but the fact that he already added a transfer who didn't stick around it just feels like that's telling me he doesn't believe in the guys he's got in that room anyways. You know what I mean? It just seems like if he's already grabbed a transfer. But to your point of, hey, let's not try to overthink the setup here. If the staff thinks this guy's the starter, I should invest in that guy.
Yeah.
I think really held true, and we'll use this to transition to another game, really held true with Jaden Daniels at LSU. Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, I don't want to invest in Jaden Daniels because he's going to end up losing his job to this guy or that guy by the time the season gets going.
Guilty.
And man, right. And Jaden Daniels has been an absolute star I would say the last month of the season, at least. He has had some performances that are just, I mean, they finally have unlocked, kind of what we thought he was capable of becoming his whole time at Arizona State, but had too much of a conservative play caller to make that happen.
Yeah, and again, we'll definitely that was a great transition over to probably the last game we'll really dive into here. Ole Miss, number 7 Ole Miss goes down to unranked LSU here, 45-20, just an absolute beating in the second half by LSU. Ole Miss never found the end zone in the second half. This game semi-vindicated me a little bit because I made the call a couple weeks ago that LSU could give Tennessee a run for their money, and then they absolutely got smashed. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe LSU isn't as good as I thought I was. But then I saw this game against Ole Miss this weekend, and I said, I knew that if this LSU team ever started clicking, specifically this offense ever really started clicking, they are a dangerous team to whoever they are playing on a week in and week out basis. They play Alabama in 2 weeks, and I think that's going to be a very interesting game. And I bet that line is going to be smaller than a lot of people kind of give it credit for. going into it. We'll definitely see. But again, like you said, Jaden Daniels, absolutely incredible performance in this game. He was the QB1 on the week, on the ground especially, dude. He 25 carries, 121 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Again, LSU clicked in this game, and Ole Miss got a little bit exposed.
He was a monster, and I think that was kind of the big deal there. You calling the LSU upsetting Tennessee didn't happen because Tennessee's legit, and it looks like LSU may have exposed Ole Miss as a little bit of a fraud here. And props to I listened to the Cover 3 podcast with some of the guys from 247 on there, and they have every week for like the last 4 weeks have said, okay, this is the top 10 team that's a fraud. And they were all over Ole Miss this week saying Ole Miss is the fraud. They're the fraud that doesn't belong in the top 10. And they were absolutely right. What happened to Evans? Was he hurt, or was he in trouble? What's the deal?
So basically from what I gathered was that there was like a nagging injury that they said that he was going to be limited. Limited was the word that they used.
Okay.
And so I figured like, okay, regardless, as they start Quinshon Judkins Day because they're going to not give him a ton of carries, and then he just didn't play at all. So
this worries me if I were a Zach Evans owner, because we heard literally the exact same thing last year at TCU, and he was going to be limited with like an ankle or toe, I can't remember what, and then we didn't see him for like 3 weeks. And so I'm just wondering if we see something like that happen here, because Ole Miss has certainly got a guy they can turn to that they have no problem giving a workload carry amount to with Judkins. He's a boss.
Yeah, dude, Judkins is going to be a beast for CFF. I know Dan on Twitter at one point like asked if Judkins was the RB1 for next year in CFF, and honestly, I don't think it's outside the question.
I think that's a fair assessment as well. I was actually thinking about that earlier today. I was thinking, okay, who would be the QB1, who would be the RB1, and I actually thought maybe Baron Morton ends up being the QB1 with that volume he's getting. So,
I mean, if he keeps that job the rest of the year, absolutely,
he's keeping that job the rest of the year. That's his job, man. Dude, I'm telling you, he's.
I would love nothing more. But also,
people listening to the whole 3 QB thing. I don't know why that staff continues to.
I know
put
why
that out there. I think they think that other teams are preparing for all 3. But if I'm smart enough to realize they're just playing Baron Morton, there's no way that like West Virginia's staff came out and at halftime were like, holy crap, I can't believe they didn't play the other quarterbacks. Is that the problem, West Virginia? Is that the problem, Neil Brown? Is that why you guys got smoked off the field because you were planning on playing Tyler Shough too?
Yeah, they're planning on playing 3 QBs and then didn't realize that the team also had 2 running backs.
Right, yeah.
So, again, we've talked long enough. I would love to dive into Syracuse versus Clemson and Kansas State versus TCU, but only things I'll say there is congrats TCU and Clemson for the win. Clemson, you had some of the biggest ref ball I've ever seen in my entire life happen in that game, so congratulations on that win. And then TCU, man, they keep tale of 2 halves for that team consistently.
I for sure thought that TCU was going to be the fraud this week. I mentioned it many times in our Slack line that TCU is going to have 2 or 3 losses still on their schedule. And everywhere across Texas and Oklahoma with the 35-mile-an-hour winds, I just expected all these games to be lower scoring. And it
did not happen at all.
Didn't matter. Big 12 can put up points in a tornado. They don't care. They can do whatever they want and still score points. It's crazy.
All righty. Real quick, I think I'm just going to go ahead and do my spiel because it's been long enough into this podcast I haven't done the spiel. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you share us with all your friends. Share us with all of your college football friends. Again, not only are we a CFF show, we just like talking college football around here. So if you enjoy us for just talking about the different games and stuff like that, talking about different players and what we think of them, share it to all your friends and bring them along for the ride. If you're listening to this on podcast, make sure you follow us wherever you are listening. And if you can leave a 5-star review, that would be fantastic. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave us written 5-star reviews. Those are always the best. Really enjoy those. We're part of the CFF team here at Campus to Canton is myself, Nate Marquise, Brandon Sanders, and Chris Moxley, as well as our DFS gurus, Ethan Sowers and Chris K. We got podcasts, we got articles, we got weekly CFF rankings, and even more coming in the offseason. We got some stuff that we are working on that we think you guys will absolutely love. Go check it all out at campustocanton.com. You can find our podcast there, articles, and everything right there for you. I think that was short enough. Let's go ahead and move on to a quick little segment that I felt, or really this is Nate's idea, so I got to give him credit here. But again, it's midway through the season. It's a nice, things are kind of settled out a little bit where waivers aren't as prioritized right now because a lot of the studs, we have kind of figured out who they are. There will be some guys who pop up here in between the end of the season, but it kind of gives us a little bit of break to kind of look back on things in retrospect. And we'll discuss some of the things that Nate and we feel really got wrong coming into the season. And now with the benefit of hindsight, what we really, really think we screwed up. And I think we'll do what we did wrong this week. And Nate, I think next week we go on a more positive note. We'll do some victory lapping next week on some things that we absolutely nailed.
Confession time this week, victory lapping next week.
Yes.
I like it. Okay.
I always end on the positive note. So we'll start with mine. Nate and I got 2 each, and we'll start with mine here first. My first confession, or my first admittance that I did something wrong here. Michael Trigg and Zach Kuntz as tier 1 tight ends this year. Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers, to me, were going too high. I thought there was so much more value in grabbing guys like Trigg and Kuntz in that round 4-5 range rather than reaching up for Bowers and Meyer in that 2-3 range. And to me, they were all in the same tier. I pretty much would grab the 4th guy out of the top 4 at pretty much every given time. Man, did I miss the mark on these two being tier 1 tight ends. And 2 different reasons. I mean, obviously Trigg is hurt, so that's part of it. But at the same time, he wasn't really doing much before that point because Ole Miss really was one of the best rushing offenses in the country this year between Evans and Judkins. There was no need to pass the ball a whole ton. And even when they did, Trigg wasn't the guy that I thought they would kind of zero in on. Maybe that happens a little bit next year when they only have Judkins, they don't have Evans anymore, and they have to kind of bring it off of the running game just a little bit. Who knows? So I'm holding on to Trigg in dynasty leagues if I can. But then Zach Kuntz, man, I focused way too much in on the number of targets he got last year, completely ignored the number that was the fact that he only caught like 52% of his targets. And that happened again. That's happening again this year. And it's even worse because teams now know to zero in on him, double him up. And for a while, Ali Jennings wasn't really getting going, so Kuntz was the only pass-catching option for Old Dominion, and he got shut down quite a bit, and now he's hurt as well. So, not a great tight end combo here for me.
Ali Jennings, by the way, is sneakily, quietly having a monster year. Like his last few weeks.
He's wide receiver 3 on the season, by the way.
Dude, he was somebody that early in draft season, like in the spring, I was scooping him up everywhere. And then I started looking at my rosters. I'm like, God, if he's not really good, I'm going to be in trouble. So I started like kind of backing off him. And I wish I would have just hammered the gas pedal with him. Dude, I'm with you. We had our discussion on Trigg in the, when we were discussing the rankings, the ranking summit that we did, and I was defending having him much lower than you guys, and you guys talked me into moving him up, and I moved him up into that same tier with the other big 2, and I'm regretting that. He turns out he's pretty touchdown dependent, and he only had 1 game where he got touchdowns, so that was a problem. So I'm with you. It was a lesson learned for me that I never reach for tight ends until this year, and I reached in a lot of my best balls and even my home league, and I regret it. I should wait on tight ends.
Again, I understand the want to grab one of the early tight ends because I have some leagues this year where I didn't get a guy like Prescore and didn't get a guy like Joel Wilson, and I am struggling week after week to find a tight end that is going to get me at least just a little bit of production. I thought in so many leagues I had Koisel, and then now all of a sudden he's just non-existent for Ball State, and I'm sitting here like, all right, back to the drawing board. So like I understand wanting to get a guy like Myers, wanting to get a guy like Bowers, where it's every week you kind of know you're going to get something good out of him. But I think I keyed in on these two just a little bit too much, trying to balance the boat there a little bit too much.
Everybody wants to get the next Mayer and Bowers, and it turns out there's only one Mayer and one Bowers. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of what we're realizing here.
Well, yeah, and again, there's other tight ends that have done well this year. Obviously, Dalton Kincaid, now that Keithy's out for a while, he's tied in 2 on the year. Joe Wilson turned out to be one of the better grabs in the later half. Jatavian Sanders, I wish I talked myself into more Jatavian Sanders this year. Like, I knew that if there was a tight end to emerge at Texas, it was going to be him. I just didn't convince myself that there would be a tight end to emerge at Texas. But c'est la vie. We'll move on to my other miss on the year, and man, it's this Alabama wide receiver room, man. Nate, you and I were probably singing some Britney Spears because of how badly I have misread this room. Now, granted, JoJo Earl getting hurt and being out for like a third of the season definitely did not help.
Hey, JoJo's making a little bit of a push. He's given us hope. It's not good. We're definitely behind the 8 ball, but the fact that he's on the field and he scored another touchdown, he's doing stuff. So there's hope that, hey,
there's hope.
Maybe.
But at the same time, the unfortunate thing is Ja'Cory Brooks, after not starting the year, is still like, I'd say out of the bunch, he's probably the most consistent. But it's like consistently mediocre every week. Like, none of these guys truly broke out. God, I missed on Jermaine Burton. And like, that still makes no sense to me. Jermaine, if you're ever listening to this podcast, which I doubt you are, but if you are, please write a memoir of everything that went on between Georgia and now Alabama and everything, because I want to know what is going on. He has all the tools to be an incredible wide receiver. He's relatively tall. He is very speedy. Dude's going to have a sub 4.5 when he goes off to the NFL draft. He is going, 4.4, He's going to have sub 4.4 when he goes off to the NFL draft. There was all this talk that he and Bryce were just in sync throughout the entire offseason. You had guys like Josh Pate who were just convinced this guy was going to be a 1,000-yard wide receiver for Bama this year, and just things haven't clicked for him at all. And then Trayshawn Holden comes out of nowhere, looks good for a couple weeks. Maybe he's the guy, and then no consistency whatsoever. This is probably the most disappointing wide receiver room, I would say, in the country in terms of just none of these guys really panning out for CFF.
Yeah, everybody wanted a piece of Jermaine Burton. Early in drafts, late first, mid second round is kind of the range he was going in a lot of the drafts I was in. And I don't know, I didn't end up with any shares of him. But I could see why people wanted the supposed projected Alabama wide receiver 1. I mean, it's been a massive disappointing year for him, for sure. He may just be one of those guys. He's got a ton of tools, but it just doesn't translate on the field.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're looking at.
And it could be, again, like, I will say there will be a little bit, and I'll say a little bit of vindication if he ends up with less yardage at Alabama than he did at Georgia. So I'll be a little.
We don't want to get into my thoughts on the Georgia wide receiver.
I know.
Let's not go down that road. We're already making our confessions. Let's not take it.
No. We'll go into the confessions that you had for the Utah running back room. What's going on here, Nate?
Okay, so I think everybody knows by now, if you've listened to me before, if you heard my thoughts on the incoming freshmen and where I had ranked, and my bold prediction at the beginning of the year was that Jalen Glover would be a 1,000-yard running back this year, and he was going to be a monster in this backfield, not only for the future, but I thought he could be a really, really big-time player for 2022. And he has not been very good. He's hardly seeing the field. You can make a case. He's clearly the running back 3 there. You can make a case. They've since moved the former quarterback over to running back. What was his last? I think Jackson's his last name. I forget, but he was.
Quincy Jackson.
He transferred in from Texas. Big dude. He's now actually, last game he got a carry, and Jalen Glover did not. So Jalen Glover, he may be running back 4 there now. I think the thing that makes this where I've was totally wrong is that that hasn't been a good room. You know what I mean? We all expected Tavion Thomas to carry the load. It's like, okay, how could you expect Glover to be good when Tavion Thomas is still there? Tavion Thomas has been terrible.
No.
Tavion Thomas has been suspended. Jalen Glover even got 13 carries against Arizona State when Tavion Thomas was suspended. I was like, okay, it's time. Here we go. And all he got was 48 yards, no touchdowns. He's not even, if you take away the first game of the year versus Southern Utah, he's not even averaging 4 yards a carry. He's been objectively bad. I was way wrong.
So the good news, I would say, for you Jalen Glover fans out there, including his podcast, All Aboard the J Train, if you have not checked out Jalen Glover's podcast, quick plug there. The good news, I would say, is that Tavion Thomas, he's gone after this year. I would say more than likely, unless there's some eligibility things I just don't know about there.
He actually is eligible for another year, but I think with the way things have gone this year, I don't
with
think
the coaching, I
don't think he has any interest in I would be surprised if he's on the roster next year.
And then Micah Bernard, I believe, is also kind of nearing the end of his eligibility as well. So
he's got time left.
Oh, he's got some time left. Okay, for some reason in my head he was let's see.
Look it up.
He's only a sophomore. Yeah, he's got some time, but even still, like. That's all Glover has ahead of him. Bernard's only gotten 10 more carries than Glover has on the year already. So there's still time for Glover to make a bounce back here. Again, he's a freshman. You can't expect him to be perfect or anything like that. Not everybody can be Quinshon Judkins in their freshman year. But it definitely is a little concerning, I would say, the fact that there's been all of this hoopla going on in this Utah running back room, and he hasn't really been able to take advantage of that yet.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. There's still opportunity in the future. There's still a chance he ends up being really, really good. But yeah, I had put this Ty Jordan freshman season image in my mind.
Yeah.
And I was totally wrong about that. The other thing I was wrong about, and that is the Oregon Ducks offense. Wow. I was totally wrong on this. Sorry if you don't have a graphic on it. This I
had one. I'm not sure where it went though. So you keep talking. I'm going to see if I can find it.
I had called an audible, so Jared may not have the image here, but I'll let him work on that. I wasn't a huge fan of the Kenny Dillingham offensive coordinator hire, and I did not think his resume matched some of the jobs that he was getting, and I was totally wrong. I didn't think, Bo Nix, there it is. Bo Nix was staring at me at the end of every one of my drafts, and I could still not find a way to pull the trigger. And he's been, as we talked about, top 5 QB. Franklin has been a star. Everything looks great for that offense outside of, week 1 versus Georgia. So props to Matt Bruning, because he was one that was saying, hey, I think this offense can actually be really good. I think that they can be really successful with Bo Nix and Dillingham and some of these other guys. And I didn't believe that. And I've definitely got some egg on my face. I got to eat some crow for what I had projected with Oregon.
So we can't go too much further on this without giving Chris K some credit as well. I can already feel him screaming at the podcast right now, being like, give me some credit, because
Chris K's a monster at picking like
one or two players
late round, late teens quarterbacks, going in like round 15 or later and turning and like projecting them out to be stars. And he has done this like 3 years in a row. It's incredible.
Yeah, he absolutely nailed it with Bo Nix here. Here's my deal. I was not afraid to pick up Bo Nix. I figured I'd seen him enough at Auburn to know that, like, hey, if he even gets in a decent offense, this is like a 20-point floor right here. So I grabbed him in a lot of best balls thinking, like, alrighty, if he's playing and, like, my star quarterback just absolutely craps the bed one week or something like that, a guy like John Rice Plumlee or maybe Malik Cunningham or something like that, then he's going to be there. He's going to be that safe floor. I'm going to get 20 points out of that quarterback slot. I did not expect to be getting a consistent floor of 28 plus points every given week with this man. Mm-hmm. So I won't say that I was totally wrong on this, but again, I don't think anybody really outside, again, like maybe Matt Bruning and Chris K, could really say they saw a season like this coming for Bo Nix. Mm-hmm. And this just entire offense. Again, we'll see moving forward. Again, we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about Troy Franklin here in a second. Bucky Irving is now somebody who's definitely on my radar as somebody who is going to be I'll be looking at later into the season, because again, that is an efficient running game. Their offensive line is incredible. I am so proud of what Dan Lanning's been able to build there just immediately with that team. Yeah. Have you did you catch any of this game? Because early on in this game,
with them in UCLA,
yeah.
Oh yeah.
I would say early on in this game, they mentioned the fact that if there's a 4th and 1, they go for it every single time with a QB sneak. Why? Because they just know that offensive line can push any defensive line and get 3 yards down the field, and boom, you just convert the 4th down.
I think that's a really good point, in that everywhere Kenny Dillingham's been, as far as like Auburn and especially his time at Florida State, he has had atrocious offensive lines. And so maybe now we're actually getting the full picture of what his system looks like, because he's now got that line where he can get a push and he can give his quarterback time. So that may be a big difference maker for him there.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we move on to the waiver wires and everything, just a little quick homer deal here. Again, after watching what Oregon's done over the last 5-6 weeks and everything, I'm even more proud of what Georgia did in week 1 against this team, because
it may end up being the most dominant performance of the season, based off of if Oregon continues at the rate they're at and just mauling every other team they play. I mean, that was one of the most lopsided games of the year with 2 ranked teams.
Yeah, we'll definitely see moving forward. But again, next week, Nate and I will do a little bit of victory lapping on some things we thought we kind of nailed. But now we're going to move over into our waiver wire picks for this week. And one thing I will say real quick, we're doing things a little bit differently this week, because as I kind of touched on before, we're later into the season. We kind of know who the studs are for the most part. There's going to be very few breakouts kind of from here on out. There will still be some, and we'll be here to tell you about those, especially as we get into the playoff weeks and everything like that. You're going to want to know who to pick up week by week, who has good matchups, stuff like that. But we're kind of in that lull right now where out of this week, you're not seeing a ton of new faces in terms of guys to pick up off the waiver wire. We'll get into the honorable mention. I'll go ahead and tell you the honorable mentions for quarterback this week, because it's really a lot of guys under 40% that we've already discussed already. Jayden DeLora, Holton Ahlers, Kyle Van Treese, Baron Morton. Go grab those guys if you're off the waiver wires. But if you want to hear more about why you should, go listen to our previous podcast, Waiver Wire podcast. You'll understand why there. So instead, we're going to do something a little bit differently this week. We're going to give you maybe 1 to 3 redraft waiver wire pickups this week, but instead we're also going to give you some dynasty stashes that you can go ahead and grab off your waiver wires. Nate and I discussed that under 10% rostered I thought was a pretty good margin, and again, based on what I'm looking at here, I think every one of our dynasty stashes that we're going to talk about here are under 5%, so we did a pretty good job there of digging deep. So yeah, quarterbacks, we have 1 this week for a redraft, and then the rest we'll discuss some dynasty guys. So first things first, we're going to talk about Mr. Preston Stone here, a guy that you could be a redraft or a dynasty play, because he's got several years of eligibility left. Quarterback at SMU, Tanner Mordecai, finally benched this week. After an abhorrent performance against Cincinnati for a while, Preston Stone finally comes in. He doesn't have a great day either, though. Again, 15 passes, only 6 completions for 74 yards and a touchdown. Nate, you have been on Preston Stone pretty much this entire year. You've just been waiting for this moment where Mordecai finally gets put on the bench and Stone comes in and gets this opportunity. Why should people be excited about Stone moving forward, despite the fact that he had probably a less than stellar performance this week?
Well, it's a Rhett Lashley system, and he's got a really proven track record that his quarterback produces at a high level for CFF, and Preston Stone's a guy that has enough athleticism where he could get you some yards on the ground as well. He could get you punch in a touchdown or 2 with his legs. I still think you got to monitor the situation and make sure that the switch back that the switch is permanent. I would be surprised if they go back to Mordecai. All indications I got before the season is that they wanted Stone to kind of take that job and be the guy. So we'll see. He should hang on to it, would be my guess. The nice thing is that he has South Florida and Memphis as 2 of his 3 playoff matchups. The other one's Tulane at Tulane.
Yeah.
That's not Tulane's one of the better G5 defenses there is. That's not great, but
Yeah.
I think that they're, if this switch is made, it's a really strong system, and he is a toolsy player, and if he can put it together, he could put up some pretty big numbers.
Yeah. Full-heartedly agree. Really not much else to say there. Again, the only caveat I would really say is, again, like, keep an eye out for the fact that they could go back to Mordecai this week. But he got some pretty extensive play in this game. It wasn't like a late fourth quarter kind of deal of like, let's just see if we can get a spark kind of going here. It's like, no, They gave him plenty of snaps in this game. That kind of tells me, like, alrighty, they're more than likely looking for him to be that guy moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to understand he's a young guy. I mean, this is a guy that's never started before, so you don't know exactly what you're going to get out of him. And I doubt that they want to do this yo-yo thing of switching back and forth between the QBs. But at the same time, I doubt his leash is going to be super, super long. So, he's just somebody you would want to pick up and see how the next game or two goes. And if he runs with it, like say a Baron Morton has, then you can feel confident starting him after another week or two.
I mean, I think his leash is going to be even a little longer than that, because I think SMU they know the season's lost at this point. They're gonna they might get to a bowl game and everything like that, but like any idea of them going to an AAC championship, any kind of bigger bowl, that's all gone and everything like that. So why not just let him get out there, let him make the mistakes now, let him earn the confidence this year. I really think this might be just Mordecai might be done. We'll see what he does. I believe he has one more year of eligibility to where he can grad transfer now. Yeah. But even so, we'll definitely see. And I'll be real, Mordecai outside of a good system, I'm not sure I'm terribly excited. So
what if
don't bring it up. Don't bring it up.
All right. Never mind.
But the team that Nate was going to mention there for a second is the team of the guy that I'm going to talk about here next. I'm going to talk about true freshman quarterback here, and this is again moving on to full dynasty plays here, because we got 4 pure dynasty plays here. So if you don't play dynasty, my apologies, but it's still an interesting conversation. Kind of learning about the guys we're probably going to be talking about possibly next year.
If you don't, you should.
You should. It's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. I recommend joining one your first year. Don't join multiple. Don't be
right.
Some of y'all out there, again, especially in the C2C community, some of y'all are like, oh yeah, it's my first year of C2C and I've joined like 17 leagues. And I'm like, why? No, you're going to burn yourself out so quickly. Yeah. Anyway, let's go back on topic. Sam Jackson, quarterback out of TCU. He is a true freshman there. I think he is worth a stash because I do think that, especially if Duggan keeps having the year that he has, he probably goes off to the NFL, at least to see if he can get drafted and everything. Chandler Morris is probably still going to be there if he hangs out for another year. My big thing is that, again, first of all, Chandler Morris, when he has played, has not looked very good in this offense. Again, it could be one of those guys. It could be one of those practice heroes. In practice, he looks awesome. As soon as he's actually out there on the field, he looks like crap. Sam Jackson is another guy that has been getting a lot of hype, and there were some, if albeit brief, rumors that he could have possibly taken this job from Duggan or Morris had he continued playing the way he was at certain points during the offseason, and at times looked like the best fit for Sonny Dykes' offense moving forward. So to me, he is worth a stash, because if Duggan moves on after this year, that leaves Morris, that leaves Jackson, and I think there's a pretty good chance that Jackson could overtake Morris during the offseason for this next year, and you're looking at the next Sonny Dykes quarterback right here.
Talk about your next guy too, because I have some thoughts on both these guys, but I want to kind of group them together. I feel very similar about both of them. Let's go ahead with your other guy too.
Yes. So my next guy here as well, and I think I know where Nate's going to go, and it is a worthy conversation. We should probably started this before we got into the waiver wire picks and everything. But other guy I'm going to talk about here, Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback out of UCF, another true freshman. Mikey Keene is transferring after this year. I'm sorry, that is a done deal. He
no doubt.
John Rice Plumlee won the job. He has kept it the entire year. We have not even sniffed Mikey Keene. He is not a Gus Malzahn quarterback, to the point where Castellanos, as a true freshman, has been getting the backup snaps behind John Rice Plumlee. And he is also in this same mold in a way that John Rice Plumlee is. He is a run-first quarterback. Castellanos was a guy that most other higher-tiered schools were recruiting as a running back. Gus Malzahn came in and said, nah, you want to play quarterback? You can come play quarterback for me. And again, he fits that same kind of John Rice Plumlee mold where he's not the most efficient passer in the world, but more than likely he's going to be a run-first kind of guy. He's going to get you 100-plus rushing yards in any given game. And this Plumlee experiment so far is working out pretty well, I would say, for Malzahn. Again, obviously some up and down performances here and there.
Right.
Castellanos looks like that next dude up, especially if John Rice Plumlee, he's not going to get drafted to the NFL, but if he gets drafted to MLB, or he decides to call it quit for college after this year, I think Castellanos is that next dude up. So that's why I think they're both worth stashes. Nate, what are your thoughts on both of these guys? Because you wanted to group them together.
Yeah, so let me tell you what I like about both of these selections, and I'll tell you what I don't like. What I do like is, and this is very similar to the next guy that I'll mention, is that they both have that incredible athletic upside, that Konami code type of ability. And that's what if you were going to stash guys, and we're talking about guys that you may not see play for the next year plus, you want upside, big upside. And that has to be one of two things. Either they play in a system where they're going to throw the ball like Mike Leach or Zach Kitley quarterback, or they have ridiculous amount of athleticism that can do things where you're looking at 125 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground being a possibility to go along with their ability to throw the ball. Sam Jackson and Castellanos both have that. Both are incredibly fun to watch. I got to watch, I was a degenerate and stayed up late and watched week 1, TCU versus Colorado. It was on at like 1 o'clock in the morning after I think a weather delay. Sam Jackson finally gets to come into the game.
He looked good.
My gosh, that dude is incredibly fast. I mean, he is one of the quickest quarterbacks I've seen in a long time. And same thing with Castellanos. He is fun watching him run with the ball. The downside to these two, and you've briefly touched on it, is that they're not guaranteed a job next year. Max Duggan could come back. The NFL doesn't, at least to this point, they have not been very high on him. Even if he does go, Sam Jackson is still QB3 currently.
Yes.
He would have to hop. Oh gosh.
Chandler Morris.
Yeah, he would have to hop Chandler Morris, and I don't know that that's a given. Same thing, and you touched on with Castellanos. JRP needs to go somewhere for Castellanos to get that job, and I do think he would get the edge over the transfer that came over from UCF.
No, Timmy McLean.
Timmy McLean. Yeah, I do think that Castellanos would get the edge over him, but there's still some competition there. Gus still brought in a guy to compete in that room. That's my only concern. One of kind of the things that I look for whenever I'm doing a dynasty draft, or if I'm making moves for dynasty, give me a path to be the guy next year. That's one of my main things. I don't want to wait 2 years for a guy. And I think like that's really what you're looking for. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's kind of what I look for. And I don't know that those two get those. That's my only concern with those two guys.
Well, again, at the very least, I can give you a path to how these guys get the starting role next year. Again, Sam Jackson probably a little less so, probably a little less convincing, because I do have to say that like he has to hop Chandler Morris, which I think he can. But at the same time, again, you're right. There is definitely a risk that you're holding on to these guys in a dynasty league, and then they're not even worth anything next year, which is fair. But like you said, there's upside with both of these guys to the point to where if it does pay off, it's going to be incredible for you. Let's talk about your guys, Nate. Who are you going to go with here?
So first guy I've got listed here is Malik Hornsby. So, and like I mentioned, he falls into that same category as Jackson and Castellanos. This is one of, if not the fastest, Mike Wright may be faster, but this is one of the fastest quarterbacks in all of college football. He made a terrible decision to pull his name back out of the transfer portal. He was in the portal in the offseason in the spring, decides to come back, ends up as the QB3 right now, but he played a couple weeks ago. It's clear he's way better than Cade Ford, and I'm not worried about that. So I think he's got a path, because one of two things are going to happen. one, KJ Jefferson just moves on to
Yeah.
the NFL. He has kind of like you're saying with Max Duggan, has a similar type of season. Or two, Malik Hornsby's already been in the portal. He'll get right back in that portal again. I doubt he loves the way that things went down for him, in that type of thing. But I like him because if he ends up somewhere at a G5 level, Chris K and I have talked about it, joked about it. If he ends up like in the MAC or in the Sun Belt, something like that, oh my God, could he just go bananas?
Oh, dude,
That's what you
so
want. You just want, and the beauty of the portal is that you can take guys like this and just kind of think where they could end up. And if he does end up in a really good system, he could go bonkers.
And I think this is a good time for us to kind of discuss what the portal does with all of this, because again, with Sam Jackson and Thomas Castellanos, I gave you pass to how they earned the job this year, but a lot of that goes out the window the moment that some of these schools bring in an additional quarterback. You already talked about Castellanos, the fact that Timmy McClain's already coming in from South Florida. That's already an additional competition right there. It's much harder, I say now, in CFF to truly project these guys down several years down the road. It used to be that most of these quarterback rooms, you kind of knew the order. You knew that once this guy moves on, this guy is the one who steps up into the starting role. There's some competition here and there. But now with everybody using the portal to its fullest extent, first of all, I mean, partially it's harder to project guys, but at the same time, you don't have to give up on guys as easily anymore, because a lot of times if you are holding on to a freshman that you drafted really early because you thought, hey, the upside's incredible here, all of a sudden he enters that portal and it's like he's a freshman all over again. You see where he lands, and then you, based on where he lands, you say, alrighty, I like the situation more. I'm going to keep him on my roster, and if he doesn't, then you go ahead and let him go.
Yeah, the portal has changed things dramatically for how I view dynasty. And 3 or 4 years ago, I mean, I used to put out a tweet once a year called the Next Man Up series.
Yep.
And it was really easy 3 or 4 years ago to project who the next man up was, because you weren't seeing so much roster attrition, so much change happening.
Yep.
Nowadays, that's changed everything. Let's take Evan Prater at Cincinnati, for instance.
Yep, great call.
A year ago, he was one of the most sought after freshman QBs you could go after, because there was a clear path to him starting the next season. And what happens? Ben Bryant comes in the portal, and now we've had another season lost. You're holding on to that asset that's been devalued, and we don't know exactly what's going to play out for him anymore. Another way that it's kind of changed, like you said, you want to hold on. You can hold on to guys too. So I've gone from investing in, I still want to invest in systems, right? You still want the Texas Tech backup QB. You still want the Western Kentucky backup QB and deep dynasty stash moves. But I've also, and I think we've kind of touched on it here, guys like Jackson, Castellanos, Hornsby, and the next guy I'm going to talk about, they have big upside and they have skill to where if you are holding that card, it becomes very playable if they land at a different in a different offense, because they have, you're betting on the talent to win out. And it doesn't have to be at the school that they're currently at. It could be somewhere else. I would never 5 years ago invested in somebody like Connor Wegman at Texas A&M. It's a Jimbo Fisher offense. It's boring. It's slow, blah, blah, blah. If he transfers, he could be really good. You know what I mean? He's got talent. He's got crazy arm talent, and he's athletic enough. So he's somebody I would now maybe actually draft in a dynasty draft, but I normally would not have in the past. But my other guy, did you have anything you want to add about Malik Hornsby?
Oh, no, not at all. Again, I agree with you 100%. He's athletic. He's almost, I don't want to say he's a better KJ Jefferson, because I think Jefferson's a better passer than he is. Yeah. But in terms of just the guy, Hornsby can take off any given play and take it to the yard, or take it to the house 70 yards down the field. Right. He's an explosive player. I love him. I like it a lot. Now tell me about this next guy that, as Felix would probably say in the offseason, you made this name up. This is a made-up player. Eddie
Lee Marburger. Okay, so this is UTSA's backup quarterback. He is currently backing up Frank Harris. This is a deeper move, right? This is kind of along the same lines as like a Sam Jackson, maybe. After this year, Harris is out of eligibility. So we can confidently say we don't have to deal with him still being there. It's a proven system that has been successful for quarterbacks. Clark Cephas, and Franklin all have eligibility left. Who knows if they all come back, but if they did, what an incredible asset that would be for the quarterback there, right? I mean, you're talking about the best G5 wide receiver room in the country, probably. He's a true dual threat. He in high school put up ridiculous numbers in Texas high school. He had like 9,000 yards passing. I want to say right around 2,500 yards rushing and like 140 TDs over his career. It was insane. The numbers he put up was insane.
Stats and info tell me that's a lot of points.
That's a lot of points, right? So you like that. You like that dual threat ability. You like that there's a clear path to him starting next year. I would say really the only concern here is, one, he's never really played much in a game, so we don't know exactly what we're working with, but we do know he's the QB2 there right now because he has been the one that's came in garbage time to clean up when Harris is out. The other thing is, I think this is a prime transfer destination.
I agree.
If you're a quarterback from a P5 program that's trying to revitalize your career, trying to get your name back out there, this could be a really good landing spot, and that could hurt Marburger, obviously.
Yeah, but until then, and if you're in a deeper dynasty league, and and some of you guys have like minor spots and everything like that, where you just put guys in there and you don't worry about them for the rest of the year, you can't play them or anything like that. Marburger is a perfect guy for that, because again, he's not going to play as long as Harris is on the field. Now Harris can get hurt and everything like that. We don't wish that upon anybody, but even still, like Nate said, proven system. Even without their offensive coordinator who went up to, I think, Illinois, if I remember correctly. Went up to Illinois. They honestly, they're even better than they were last year. Granted, they hired from within, they kept the system rolling and everything, but even still, that didn't shake up anything. Harris is QB2 on the year. Marburger, if he is as good as he was in high school and everything, no doubt in my mind that he could easily produce again what Harris is doing. He's somebody that I think next year in redraft leagues is going to come at a discount. Because I think that because this happens every year where it's like the quarterback moves on and people kind of assume in the back of their mind, like, okay, the quarterback is who made that system roll. I think Marburger is going to be the kind of guy that people are like, oh, Harris made UTSA work the way it did. Marburger's not going to be able to do what Harris did, and I'm probably going to take advantage of that next year. So Let's move on to our running backs here. Again, going back to redraft here for you redraft listeners and everything, and we'll talk about some guys here. Now, granted, we're talking about some younger guys here, so these guys are kind of hybrid redraft dynasty plays as well. Granted, if you listen to this show at all, these first two guys should already have been on your dynasty roster, but if they're still available for some reason, maybe somebody got frustrated with the fact they didn't produce in the first 3 games like Nate always wants his freshmen to do, maybe they're available from somebody dropping them. But even still, let's talk about the first running back here, and that is Mr. Damian Martinez, running back out of Oregon State. Deshaun Fenwick did not play this past week, so you can point to that and say that's the reason why Martinez had an incredible game. But regardless, Martinez was already earning more carries as the season was going on regardless. Last week, with Fenwick still in the game, he got 16 carries, over 100 yards, 111 yards, didn't find the end zone. Not a problem this week. Against Colorado, granted, again, Colorado, terrible rushing defense, but still, 22 carries, 178 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This man had an absolute blow-up game, and if Fenwick continues to be hurt, I think Martinez has taken this job by the throat, and he probably has this job for the next 3 years at Oregon State. So again, he is a redraft play right now. You go grab him off the waiver wire right now. But if in Dynasty, if for some reason he is there, this is the most important asset you could pick up off the waiver wire this week in a Dynasty league. So, Nate, thoughts on Martinez?
Yeah, Jonathan Smith had mentioned after the Stanford game a few weeks ago where he carried the ball 3 times for 83 yards. They're like, what do you think of Damian Martinez? He's like, well, I think we should probably get him the ball a lot more. So, and then you saw his carries climb to 16 the next week, and then obviously 22 this week. So he's followed through on that statement. Yeah, I don't think Fenwick's getting this job back. Fenwick's fine. But we all heard it throughout the offseason about just how impressive Damian Martinez was in camp. He just needed opportunity, and he's getting that now. I was a little scared at this room with Fenwick getting carries. There was the other guy that transferred in from Georgia Tech. Griffin was getting some carries, and then around the goal line, they give it to Coletto, the jackhammer, I think is what they call it. And it's just like, man, where's the opportunity for Martinez to be the guy if he's not even getting goal line carries? and he's splitting it. But things change quickly in college football, and here we are 3 weeks later. He is clearly the guy. So he's a very good ad for sure.
Yeah, I'd say he also, first of all, very nice young man. We interviewed him at Camp Scant over the summer and everything like that. He's a very hardworking dude, and regardless, like, again, to me, if there's a possibility, like, you can say, all right, maybe Fenwick comes back, his carries on opportunities go down a little bit more because of that. Regardless, if there's even a sliver of possibility that he is the main Oregon State running back, which Jonathan Smith is no stranger to having a workhorse running back, Martinez is a must grab right now. From one freshman to another, let's go and talk about Ashton Gianti, running back at Boise State. Once again, if you've been listening to this podcast throughout the summer, you've been listening to any of the Campus Canton podcasts, you already know this dude's name. George Holani, the running back out of Boise State, who's been actually having a pretty good year, a much better year than I gave him credit for. He was out this past game, but regardless, Gianti's been getting work as well, even with Holani in the game. 2 weeks ago, he had 19 carries for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. This past week, 15 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown. He is the future at the running back position for Boise State. This is a team that, once again, no stranger to having one running back that they love to go to. And you can point to, like, oh, he only had 53 yards this past week when he was the main guy. He went up against Air Force. It's a pretty good rushing defense in the G5, so I'm not going to knock him too hard for that. I like where he is trending with Boise State. He is finally kind of doing what we wanted him to do throughout most of the season. Nate, what are your thoughts on Mr. Gianti?
Yeah, I think like Martinez, he is an ad even with George Holani coming back. If Holani is not out for a long time, I still think Gianti carries some value and he should be rostered. You can see a stark change in the offense when the OC was fired and Dirk Cutter took over as offensive coordinator. He looks at this roster and says, okay, I got a quarterback in Taylon Green that can't really pass, but he can run. I've got 2 stud running backs. Let's just ground and pound. And since they made that change, Holani has shot off, and Gianti's been fantastic.
Yep.
He catches the ball really well too. He's a complete running back. For me, he was a top 3 CFF freshman running back. I thought he would produce this year, and he is proven to really be everything that I thought he would be coming out.
I need to go through my my stats and info sheet and go through and filter it for freshmen only, just so at the end of the year I can get like a full list of all the top freshmen at each position, because I do think that'd be an interesting thing to kind of go through and see if we can find more patterns out of that in order to better identify guys going into the future.
This is a great. All you want to see is opportunity early for guys like Gianti and Martinez, and sure, it came lately. They proved a little bit, but they've really gotten to take a hold of that job because somebody got hurt. But it's clear they have the talent now. We've gotten to see that the staff is going to continue. It's even if Holani comes back, it's not like Gianti's going to go back to getting 4 carries. That's just not going to happen.
Yeah. We'll talk about our third running back of the day here in terms of really just, this is our third running back system that we were hoping would be figured out at the beginning of the season, and it's taken its sweet time to really kind of come down to one guy. And I think we have found our guy here in Cincinnati, and that is Mr. Charles McClellan, the running back there, rostered on 16% of rosters. Last 3 weeks, 13 carries for 87 yards, no touchdowns. Against South Florida, 21 carries for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. Last week against SMU, 16 carries, 129 yards, and a touchdown. Nate, is this the dude for Cincinnati? Is this the guy that if we want to have a piece of this Bearcats running game, this is the guy we should be moving forward? Or should we still be worried about Corey Kiner coming back?
I'll be honest with you. I have no idea. Every week, we change our minds, at least I do, on what the heck's happening with the Cincinnati backfield. So yeah, I'll be honest, man. I have no idea, but the volume he has gotten recently means that he needs to be somebody added to your rosters. And you got to kind of ride it out. I mean, if it looks like they're going to change it up again, then I would guess Corey Kiner would probably be that guy. He got some run in this most recent game, but I mean, McClellan getting, an average of about 16 carries over his last 3 and being very productive with those carries, I think is something you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, this feels like we're late enough into the season to where this coaching staff is just going to make a decision and say, like, all right, we wanted Kiner, we gave him as many opportunities this year with his health and everything. We're just ride out the rest of the year. McClellan's been doing a pretty good job. The Montgomery twins have been doing an all right job. If Kiner needs to sit, if he needs to heal and everything like that, these guys got it handled. And I think McClellan's the best choice right now out of the Cincinnati backfield. He is a guy that I would add, probably not start this next week, just in case anything kind of goes haywire this week. But if he has another good week, it's clear that this is their plan moving forward.
And it's at Central Florida, which has been an up and down defense, but is one of the better ones that they're going to play in the American Athletic Conference. So yeah, I'm with you. Pick him up, give it a week to marinate, and then see where you want to go from there.
Yep. Before we hit our 2 dynasty plays at running back here, I just want to throw out some honorable mentions of some redraft guys you can look at this week. Dave Fofana, the running back in a Navy. Normally, I would hate recommending a triple option Service Academy running back outside of Brad Roberts, but Fofana has been getting consistent work the last couple of weeks. I believe he's been averaging about 20 to 25 touches per game the last 3 games. I don't know how long that lasts. Typically, it's like the moment you actually start one of these Service Academy running backs outside of Brad Roberts, that's the week that they decide to absolutely crap the bed. But for now, somebody to keep an eye on. Ron Cook, the running back out of Buffalo, somebody I would keep an eye on as well. And then Jalen Jenkins, running back out of Washington State. I believe that running back room has been seeing quite a bit of injury lately. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Nate. And that's part of the reason.
Sounds like Nakia Watson's going to be out for a few weeks at least.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much Jenkins' backfield now. I mean, he's the guy. He catches the ball well. I could see him having a pretty strong finish to this year, actually.
There you go. So let's move on to our dynasty plays here. Again, these are stashes. These are not guys we're expecting to do anything this year, but we want to go ahead and start throwing some of these names out for you guys, especially as we get later into the season here. First running back I'm going to talk about here, Mr. Keegan Jones, running back out of UCLA. Obviously, Zach Charbonnet is that dude. He is not going to overtake Zach Charbonnet anytime soon. That's why I said he's not a guy that we're looking at this year. However, he is kind of clearly that number 2 running back for UCLA right now. Again, he's getting roughly about the same number of carries as Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He is a very good receiving back out of the backfield for the most part. They like to find creative ways to get him the ball. He is he to me, he is a similar build of Zach Charbonnet, maybe a little bit smaller, but even so, he plays a lot of the same roles that Zach Charbonnet could do. I think this is your lead back for UCLA next year, barring some kind of transfer coming in. Again, clearly UCLA, not a stranger to transfers. Zach Charbonnet and Britton Brown, their last 2 major running backs were both transfers, but regardless, Keegan Jones seems like the kind of guy that's earned the trust of the staff. So, Nate, what do you think about Keegan Jones?
Yeah, I mean, he's the clear RB2 there right now, and he's kind of their third down back, but he's also, I mean, Zach Charbonnet sat out a game earlier this year, and Keegan Jones got majority of the workload when he was out. So he's kind of getting this opportunity to show what he can provide for this team next year. I get where you're coming from with the transfer portal. I do think that this could be a primary transfer destination for a running back. But if he shows the staff what he's capable of, and he's he's going to have a clear leg up going into next year. So I think this is a pretty solid choice here. He's somebody that I actually have stashed in some of my dynasty leagues.
One thing that I'll also throw out here is that high 4-star running back Roderick Robinson was originally committed to UCLA, was going to be one of the bigger gets of their recruiting class this year. And a lot of people were saying that there was a path to Roderick Robinson possibly overtaking Jones in that first year. Again, we'll see. We all say that about a ton of freshman running backs every year, but even still, that's no longer there because Robinson recently flipped to Georgia. And so UCLA doesn't have that prime running back coming in, that clear next guy up, that heir apparent after this. So Keegan Jones has less competition. So many things pointing to a good year for Jones next year.
Travesty for Robinson. travesty. He did not get to go to the Chip Kelly system. He's going to get buried on the depth chart in Georgia, but fine. I know one of us in this conversation is perfectly fine with that. But also Deshaun Morrell, he's another guy that he's in year 2 now. He's done absolutely nothing. This staff clearly prefers Keegan Jones over Deshaun Morrell. Maybe he makes a step in the offseason, but he's somebody that hasn't done anything. You can't have any confidence rolling with him.
I would say, which guy are you guys going to trust more? The guy that's gotten 49 carries so far this year, or the guy who's got 6? All right.
And keep in mind, even though the Keegan Jones is undersized, this is the same staff that made Felton. Felton, right?
Yeah,
was the little guy that they had before Charbonnet and Britton Brown. They didn't have any problem giving him 25 touches a game. Nope. They don't care that he's undersized.
Yeah, and Jones is fast. Jones is a very speedy guy.
He's a track guy. Yeah, he's a track guy.
So, very good weapon for UCLA moving forward. Nate, give me your dynasty stash at running back for midseason.
Absolutely. So similar to Keegan Jones.
Same number.
Is it really?
Yeah, they're both 22.
Malik Sherrod is my choice. He's a running back out of Fresno State. So he's playing the number 2 to Jordan Mims right now. And we've got to see a fair amount of run from him this year, but he's somebody that nobody's talking about. He's 1% owned. He's available out there. And he is, he's getting a small share of the workload, but he's gotten some run this year and he's looked pretty good. He's putting up a half a yard per carry more than Mims has so far this year. This is a proven Jeff Tedford system with numerous CFF running backs that have been big time producers. Similar to UCLA. Of course, this could be a transfer destination. Yeah. But at the same time, he is really proving right now with his performance so far this system that he is a very capable player should they decide to not dip into the portal and make him the guy next year. And I mean, you're seeing when that system's doing fine and the quarterback's in there, I mean, that's a really, really strong running back opportunity there.
Yeah, and I was actually just about to say, well, are you concerned at all about the fact that without Jake Haener, this offense has kind of really slowed down to the point where there's not a lot of CFF value to be found? But again, they just played New Mexico this past week. Now, granted, it's New Mexico, but New Mexico's got a pretty decent defense there in the Mountain West, and they threw up 41 points on them. So, and Mims had his best game in weeks. He had 165 yards. So maybe all it is just the fact that they were dealing with a younger quarterback that wasn't ready to be the starter just yet. And so with an off season to get things right and everything, I like this call quite a bit.
And he's just a sophomore by eligibility. So you're getting multiple years with him if he ends up being the guy next year.
Yep. Like the call a lot. Keegan Jones and Malik Sherrod, definitely go stash those on your dynasty rosters. Let's flip it back over to the wide receivers and let's go back to some of these guys who are redraft only guys. Now, again, they're obviously valuable on dynasty rosters if you want to win this year, but we're talking about this year guys. And to me, this is probably the bigger name, I would say, off of the waiver wire this week out of pretty much all of them. This is probably the guy I would have ranked as my number 1 guy to grab. And that's Troy Franklin, the wide receiver out of Oregon. Man, what a show he put on this past week up against UCLA. 10 targets, 8 receptions, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And that is not entirely out of the ordinary. Him and Bo Nix have really, really started to develop a really good chemistry together. And all you needed to do was just watch this game. Against UCLA this past weekend, Bo Nix threw one of the best passes, if not the best pass I've ever seen him throw. And it was a perfect dime right down the field to Troy Franklin. If either one of those guys were off in the slightest, that ball would not have worked. And it was perfectly placed. Troy Franklin knew exactly where it was going to be. And that tells me that there are big things for these two moving forward down the stretch. As Nate mentioned earlier, there are not many Pac-12 defenses that are going to be able to stop this offense moving forward. And I really think that Troy Franklin, get used to seeing 20-plus point performances from him in a week-in and week-out basis because he is very talented in his own right. But again, combine that with the chemistry he now has with Nix, I like it a lot. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, as we talked about during my confession time, I can't believe here we are, towards coming down the home stretch of the season, and I'm recommending an Oregon wide receiver. I would not have thought that would have been the case at the beginning of the year, but you're absolutely right. Him and Nix are just really on the same page right now, and he trusts Troy Franklin's ability to pull down just about anything he throws at him, and he's become the clear number one wide receiver there. And this is an offense that is scoring on average, 45 to 50 points every week. So
yep.
You want the top wide receiver for Bo Nix for sure right now.
Yeah. Again, if nothing else, that Oregon's going to find points every given week. Very similar to Jake Bobo, or not very similar. I think Troy Franklin's a better play right now, but similar to Jake Bobo, UCLA is going to put up points on the week, so you just grab Jake Bobo, and he's probably going to get one of those touchdowns. Franklin, very similar situation here. Again, against Arizona, a little bit of a dud week, but every other week has been great for Franklin. I have no problem with him moving forward. Moving on to our next wide receiver here. This comes from a offense that I think a lot of us have kind of just left dead in the water. Nate and I know we definitely crapped on the quarterback here, Tyler Van Dyke, for a while, and we've crapped on this wide receiver room at Miami quite a bit, but it seems like now we finally have somebody emerging for the Hurricanes, and that is Mr. Colby Young, wide receiver out of Miami, who is rostered on 2% of rosters right now. Last 3 weeks, let's look at this. 4 targets, 3 receptions, 43 yards, and a touchdown against UNC. Okay, fine, that's fine. Then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere against Virginia Tech, 15 targets, 9 receptions, and a touchdown for 110 yards. Okay, that's fine. That's clearly that's just a fluke, right? No way he just jumps that much. Well, here we go against Duke. 9 targets, 6 receptions, 127 yards, and 2 touchdowns. By the way, he caught touchdown passes from not one, but 2 different quarterbacks in this game. This is not a chemistry deal. This is just Young is getting open, and he is being one of the guys that Miami can rely on right now. And we've seen with Miami that with guys like Charleston Rambo emerging late down the season, that this could be a guy you want moving forward. So, Nate, what do you think about Mr. Young?
Yeah, really interesting. It seems like Miami has realized that, hey, we can't run the ball. We really can't stop teams on defense like we thought we could. Let's air it out. We've got a quarterback that has, a couple of quarterbacks that can really throw the ball pretty well. Let's just let them. Let's just air it out. And I can't believe that it took us till like week 6 or 7 before we got to look at Colby Young based off how bad this wide receiver room was. Mm-hmm. This guy comes essentially out of nowhere. He played JUCO last year. This is his second. He only played 1 year at JUCO. He's a sophomore now at Miami. And they got a taste of him there in that North Carolina game. And then they're like, yeah, no, he's the man. And he's going to be our number 1 wide receiver. And if you've seen some replays, I would encourage you to go out to search Twitter or Google, whatever, for Colby Young, some of his catches. This guy's made some insane, you can see it in the picture that you've posted here. This guy's made some insane one-handed catches. This guy catches just about everything that gets thrown at him. So, I think that we're going to see Miami air it out a little bit more. They've got Virginia, Florida State, Georgia Tech coming up as their next 3. I could see him consistently being, a 5-catch, 100 yards and a touchdown type guy.
Yeah, easily. And I did just, sorry for everybody on the audio there, I did just look up Colby Young's highlights because it's not a game I have not been able to watch Miami game. So I'm trying to watch this really, really quickly just to see. And yeah, just immediately the first throw that I see to him, perfectly positioned. Yeah, he looks legit moving forward. I would very much be on board with grabbing Young for any roster that is especially struggling at receiver. I think he is a guy that you need to grab. Last pure redraft guy we're going to talk about here before Nate and I discuss some of our dynasty stash wide receivers. Luke McCaffrey, the transfer from Nebraska, former quarterback, little brother of Christian McCaffrey, now a wide receiver at Rice University, rostered on 30% of rosters. Again, he's already pretty well owned, but it's a guy that, again, he's had some insane weeks. Week let's see, was that week 3 against UL Lafayette? 14 targets, 10 catches, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns, as well as the fact that this past week against Louisiana Tech, 11 targets for 10 receptions, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns, as well as 3 rushing attempts on the ground for 31 yards and a touchdown. Dude is just a weapon for the Rice program right now. They're in the midst of conference play. We don't have to worry about him getting shut down by better Power 5 defenses. They play in the CUSA. He's going to find work any given week. And again, his volume's just insane right now. I think he's absolutely worth a stash. Or a grab right now. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, he's been kind of up or down, but it looks like he kind of plays. When he's not going up against a really good defense like UAB, he tends to perform at expectations, and he tends to get close to 10 targets. So, and obviously it's a big bonus, the fact that he is going to be running the ball. I mean, consistently is getting a handful of carries each game. Who knows? You could even get, he's former quarterback. You could even get a potentially a passing touchdown on like a trick play type deal.
Yep.
I mean, those are all options that Rice could use him with, because he's kind of a Swiss Army knife for them. So, yeah, I mean, double-digit targets. Again, you gotta add those guys, go after them for sure.
Yeah, just put them on your roster. No, anybody who you can. Again, there's definitely guys on your roster that have not gotten double-digit targets in like 6 weeks, right, and you're still holding on to them for some reason. Just go grab a guy like
Rice's schedule. I was going to say, I was trying to see what their schedule looks like. Playoff schedule: Western Kentucky, UTSA, and North Texas. So
okay, 3 great matchups.
Yeah. I mean, those are really good potential to put up, a high scoring game, similar to what we saw with Louisiana Tech, 42-41 this last weekend. So yeah.
Yep. Alrighty, quick honorable mention at wide receiver, Elijah Badger, the wide receiver out of Arizona State. I don't think Arizona State's a great team right now, but man, when they throw the ball, it looks like it's going Elijah Badger's way quite a bit. Definitely somebody to keep an eye on here down the stretch. Let's talk about some dynasty guys here at wide receiver, Nate. First one I'm going to throw up here, this is a guy that had a pretty monster game. I don't want to say monster game, but he had a pretty awesome game this past week against Texas. I'm going to talk about true freshman wide receiver Stephon Johnson, wide receiver out of Oklahoma State, not rostered anywhere, literally 0%. A lot of us, myself included, were really in on Talon Chetron going into this year, and he has really not done much on the year. We saw a few targets towards him, especially in the end zone this game against Texas. But it was Stephon Johnson that was really stepping up for the Hokies in this game. Aren't they? They're the Pokes or something like that. Like
they're the Pokes. I mean, the Cowboys are there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I got that confused. Yeah, sorry, Virginia Tech fans. Anyway, the Pokes, the Cowboys. He stepped up for them, regardless of what mascot he was flying his flag under. Again, 9 targets, 6 catches, 90 yards. I am not ready to say that this is the Oklahoma State wide receiver you need to go pick up for your redraft league this year. That has been a revolving door the entire year for Oklahoma State. They can't seem to settle on anybody there, but I think Stephon Johnson is definitely worth grabbing and throwing onto your roster in case he is that dude next year. Because again, they eventually have to go with somebody that proves that they can do it on a game-by-game basis. Stephon Johnson is definitely off to a pretty good start here as a freshman. What do you think about Stephon Johnson, Nate?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good call. I mean, if you play in a dynasty league, Talon Chetron is not going to be available. He's somebody that was targeted pretty early in dynasty drafts. Stephon Johnson didn't even play in the spring. He didn't show up early. He didn't arrive on campus until June, and he's gotten way more reps than Chetron has. And he was like the 3rd ranked wide receiver in Oklahoma State's class. But yeah, he's getting reps now. The staff clearly likes him. He's playing a position that historically has been really, really productive. The boundary wide receiver under Mike Gundy. He's 6'2", 190 pounds. So he's got the requisite size that you want to be able to play that role. I mean, all things are indicating, at least right now, that maybe we were wrong on Shetron, and that it was Johnson that should have been the guy that was more heavily targeted, because that's how it's playing out so far. But yeah, I mean, obviously you can't give up on Shetron, but
No.
this is a really strong speculative ad. Like I said, if you're going to stash guys in Dynasty, you want the upside to be there, and because of the system that exists with Stephon Johnson.
Yeah, and I would heavily suggest that if you do have Shetron on your roster, I would honestly, in any roster I still have Shetron on, if I am bidding for Johnson this upcoming week, I would up my bid just a little bit more, just to make sure you get him. Because again, I think one of those two guys, both have the talent. One of those two guys will be a stud for the Cowboys moving forward. Again, I don't know if it's going to be this year. They seem to be very content about just different guy any given week, but
I think the frustrating part with Shetron, and this kind of goes back to my frustrating part with Jalen Glover. Jaden Bray's been hurt this whole year.
Yeah.
And he still can't get that much opportunity. So
man, Braden Johnson's been hurt too.
Right. Yeah.
Again, it's been very much a revolving door. Let's move on to your guy here, your ad on Dynasty rosters, Nate. Got Squirrel White, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, rostered on 4% of leagues right now. What do you like so much about Squirrel?
So he's a true freshman, plays in the slot there at Tennessee. He looks to be the next man up to follow Jalen Hyatt. And if you've been paying attention to Jalen Hyatt's production, you kind of would want the next man up to fill into that spot. Jalen Hyatt has 12 touchdowns already this year. His stat lines have been insane. And we got to see a little bit of that. Squirrel White came into the game pretty late against Tennessee Martin this week, and caught a bomb from Joe Milton for a touchdown. So I think he had like 100 and something yards and off 5 catches. He's one of the fastest wide receivers, incoming freshman wide receivers. He is crazy fast. He got some really strong reviews out of camp from the staff. Everybody, they had a really, really nice incoming wide receiver group there at Tennessee. And yet all of the coaches seem to reiterate the same point, that Squirrel White is going to be a pretty special player there in Knoxville. So if we're assuming that Jalen Hyatt moves on, which I think is a pretty safe assumption at this point, I don't think that he can top what he's doing right now. He needs to go make that money while he can.
Yep.
Squirrel White seems to be a really strong candidate to take that role and run with it next year.
Yeah, I agree 100%. He is that perfect burner type. I know for a fact that schools like Georgia, schools like Alabama were heavily involved in Squirrel's recruitment. Recruitment process, because again, they know that kind of receiver that can just absolutely take the top off of any defense, just run right by their cornerbacks, is such a valuable piece to have. And in a Josh Heupel offense, that's even better. And if you really do believe that Joe Milton can be that guy next year, and if he can work on his accuracy issues downfield and everything like that, that Milton to White connection could be there for them all year next year. So I like
even if it. I was just gonna say, even if it's not Joe Milton, whoever the quarterback is, they're going to produce for Josh Heupel, and there's going to be big time opportunity for these wide receivers it's going to be by all indications, it looks like there's going to be a fair amount of turnover with this wide receiver room. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because again, Hyatt's probably gone, Tillman's probably gone if he comes back and produces pretty decently.
Yeah.
So
those are your 2 top guys.
Yeah. Alrighty. Let's finish up with the tight ends here. We got one that's a redraft, fun little ad here, and then the other one, I would say, we didn't label it as a dynasty play, but I think Nate wants it to be a dynasty play. But let's talk about the first guy here. Tight end out of Tennessee, Princeton Fant, not really used that much as a tight end because, man, the last couple of weeks, Tennessee has loved the idea of goal line touches for this man. Against Alabama, he had 1 carry for 2 yards and a touchdown. And he was also using the tight end position a little bit. Again, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 24 yards. Again, that's not where his value is coming from. His value is coming from the fact that Tennessee doesn't want to be giving the ball to Jabari Small on the goal line, or Hendon Hooker really anymore, it seems like. Again, they seem pretty content with throwing Princeton Fant out there and letting him get it. And then this past week against UT Martin, he had 2 carries for 12 yards and 2 touchdowns. Because again, as soon as they got within 10 yards of the goal line, they're like, you know what? Let's throw it to Princeton here and see what he can do with it. Again, heavily touchdown dependent. Do not expect him to be doing this every week from here on out. But it is to me a fun little ad here to go along for anybody who's kind of struggling at tight end and, is looking for those guys with tight end eligibility that are getting these unique roles like this. So Nate, what do you think about Princeton here?
I think Hooker and small owners hate this man. That's for sure. I am a Hooker owner. That sounds weird to say.
I'm cutting out that audio later of Nate going, I am a Hooker.
I love Hooker. But no, he's getting those carries around the goal line, and it's clear the staff has a package for him to be involved. He even threw a touchdown pass to Jalen Hyatt in the last game against UT.
Oh yeah, good call. I completely forgot about that.
So clearly they like using him kind of in that Swiss Army knife mold. He's 6'2", like 235. So he's not a true tight end in that sense. He's just kind of that H-back or whatever you want to call him that just kind of roams all over the backfield and gets touches in a variety of ways. So yeah, like you said, super touchdown dependent. But if you're desperate for a tight end, he's somebody you could plug in and cross your fingers and hope that he throws another touchdown, I guess.
Yep. Again, like I said, with some of these tight ends and everything, if you're struggling in that position, just look for guys who are getting unique roles on their offense and just happen to have a tight end designation. So I don't have to speak anymore, Nate. Tell us about our next tight end here.
Mason Taylor, tight end for LSU. So he's a true freshman. He is started from day one there at LSU. Now his role has been kind of hit or miss. He doesn't get much more than a handful of targets each game, but he is involved. And he kind of had a little bit of a breakout game here against Ole Miss. 5 targets, 3 receptions, 44 yards, and a touchdown. But what I like about him is that Brian Kelly said before the season started, he goes, "Hey, you guys know that tight end over there in Georgia?" He probably said this in a really fake Cajun accent, but he said, "Hey, you know that
y'all know that tight end over there at Georgia?
Y'all know that Brock Bowers? I'll tell you what, this Mason Taylor guy, he can be just like him." But no, that's Brian Kelly said, "Hey, Mason Taylor he's going to be our Brock Bowers." Now, of course, it's Brian Kelly, and none of that really came true, but he is somebody that has started from day one. I mean, it's really hard to find a true freshman tight end that steps in day one and is playing. So I mean, there's going to be some opportunity moving forward for him. So I think if you're in a deeper dynasty league, he's somebody you really have to pay attention to and probably add to your roster and see if he continues on that trajectory. Yeah,
I like this call a lot because, again, not only you mentioned he's going to have opportunity going forward because guys like Keishon Butte, he's gone after this year. There's no way he's sticking around. Jeray Jenkins, I think, is on his last year of eligibility. Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, I believe, are eligible after this year. I can't remember if they've been in LSU for 2 or 3 years. But even so, they have the option. And it seems like wide receivers out of LSU just get drafted because of their helmet sometimes, regardless of what they produce on the field. So maybe they just say, hey, screw it. They'll take an LSU wide receiver in the 5th or 6th round. And all that does is just open up more and more opportunities for Mason Taylor moving forward. You saw it last year with Brock Bowers. Part of the reason why Brock Bowers opened up last year for Georgia was because he had so many injuries at wide receiver, so many guys move on. It just left opportunities open for him, and he produced.
Yeah.
So I like that call a lot. And go ahead.
I was just going to say he's super athletic too. He's got that rare level of athleticism, that Michael Trigg type athleticism that you want from your tight ends to give you that upside. Brock Bowers is breaking off 70-yard catches. You want that type of athleticism. His dad is Taylor, the Hall of Fame defensive end that played for the Miami Dolphins.
Perfect.
So I mean, what kind of athleticism you're kind of getting with this guy.
Yeah. And the most important part of all of this is the fact that Brian Kelly, with all of his love, really made Taylor feel like he was a big part of that LSU family.
The family. The 4-syllable family.
On that note, to the 4-syllable family. On that note, that pretty much brings us to the end of our show. Again, a little bit of a longer one, but I feel like there was a lot of great information for both redraft and dynasty players here today. Again, don't expect the dynasty sashes every week kind of moving forward and everything. I just thought, given the fact that there weren't a lot of super obvious waiver wire pickups this week, that we could take the opportunity to just kind of discuss a few of those guys moving forward. A lot of you guys DM me every once in a while and say like, hey, who are some guys you're kind of stashing for next year? I'm trying to get ahead of the curve. Well, this podcast is the way to get ahead of that curve. Nate, you have been absolutely awesome today, sir. Do you got anything coming up that you want to throw out there to the audience that they can chew on until you actually release it?
Yeah, a couple of weeks I'll be putting together some dynasty stuff. As we kind of transition towards the end of the season, looking at some transfer portal type stuff. So, but that's still a couple 2 to 3 weeks out. Right now, you can check out my my mid-season kind of risers and fallers that I put out recently. So go to campuscanton.com and you can see those articles there.
Yeah, absolutely go check those out so you can look at the positive regression article and see all of your opponent's guys are going to get more touchdowns the rest of the year, and all of your guys on the negative regression article are going to get less touchdowns. And then you can go cry like I did. So again, Nate did an awesome job on those. He did very well researched. Absolutely go check out those articles. Again, make sure you check out the other CTN episode coming out later this week on Wednesday. Guys, it is bye week hell this week. All of our Maction guys are off this week. So many teams are off this week, and it is going to be difficult to find find guys to start in your rosters. I know one of my rosters, it's an 11-man roster. I had 8 of my starters on bye weeks this week.
Ouch.
Not very good planning on my part, but regardless, that's just the reality some people are facing. So it's going to be a very, very interesting week in terms of sit starts, in terms of what games you can take advantage of this week. So absolutely check out that. And yeah, with that being said, y'all have been awesome. Really appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you guys have a wonderful and blessed day. See y'all.